Embodying the essence of a true explorer, Kinga Philips has painted her life's journey with strokes of daring and adventure. She dives deep into oceanic abysses, scales towering mountain peaks, and embraces the kaleidoscopic cultures of vibrant, far-flung locales. This intrepid spirit is reflected in a media career that spans a multitude of platforms, including Al Gore's Current TV, Sci-Fi's Legend Quest, National Geographic's America's Lost Treasures, and the renowned Discovery Channel's Shark Week. More than just a television personality, Kinga contributes regularly to Inside Hook and Adventure Journal, sharing tales of her explorations. A survival expert on the Gamology series Experts React and a travel expert for Beyond TV, Kinga is a force to be reckoned with. As a fellow of the prestigious Explorers Club and a board member of the nonprofit environmental group Shark Allies, her commitment to conservation is undeniable. A familiar voice on platforms like Now This, Forbes, Beyond TV, The Artie Lang Show, Inside Hook, and more, Kinga passionately advocates for shark conservation, ocean preservation, and access to clean water.
Well, I'm so stoked to be sharing a little bit about your story with our community. You've been a huge supporter of Seatopia since the very beginning. I'm super grateful to have you as a dear friend, a sister in this journey. I'm excited to introduce some of the people in the Seatopia community to the work that you've been doing, Kinga. But let's start with kind of how you were raised, a little bit about your transition from, I think your father was a geologist and your mother was a pharmacist in Poland, and really rooted, I think, in that experience in the earth. And then you've taken this journey really into the oceans. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience and how you became a water person?
A water person. Well, you're accurate that my dad was a geologist, so he had a real connection to the earth, to minerals, to groundwater, to oil. And my mom was a pharmacist in Poland, which is quite different than being a pharmacist here. She actually wasn't allowed to practice when we came here because most of her background was in plants. And so my mom is very familiar with the Latin name of almost every plant out there, and then of course other medications as well, but there's such a heavy emphasis on that. So that was very special, and we always were out in the natural world. We came from Poland to Oklahoma, but our big road trips that were just my greatest passion that I looked forward to were to Florida. And so we would go to Florida, and then my sister and I would play a game who would see the ocean first. And the ocean in Florida is warm and clear, and it was the closest we could come and could afford to tropical vacations. So I would definitely pinpoint Florida as a pivotal point in my life where I fell in love with the ocean.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, those early memories of being in the ocean and just looking forward to going to the ocean were also pivotal for me. I love that story. And I would imagine going from Oklahoma to Florida in particular was just like a huge event.
Oh, and it was a culture shock because here you are in the prairies of the Midwest, completely landlocked with bison and coyotes. And then we would get in our big blue van and we would road trip to Florida. And here are beaches and orange groves and horseshoe crabs. I remember being obsessed with horseshoe crabs and the smell of orange blossoms and just these rolly, gentle, warm waves. I mean, it was magic. I remember seeing sea turtles and these creatures that to me, it was like reading like a sci-fi story and then having everything come to life.
And with your dad being a geologist and you guys being in Oklahoma, I don't know too much about Oklahoma, but I would assume at one point that was underwater and there's some fossil relics. Is that anything that you guys found? Did you ever find connections between fossils in Oklahoma and the horseshoe crabs that you found in the ocean?
Yes, great question. So one of our favorite things to do was there was a place actually called Fossil Hill just outside of Bartlesville. And we would go there as the total nature-loving, nerdy family that we were with bags. And we would go and we would find, bags and bags and bags of fossils. When we moved out of our place in Oklahoma, it was like, wow, what do we do with this truckload of fossils? And it was all just fossilized plants, like pieces of trilobites, like teeth. I mean, the coolest things that you could ever imagine. So you're so right that even there in landlocked Oklahoma, there was this connection to a more ancient ocean.
Yeah, the blue planet. I mean, today it's 70%, but it was 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's continually in flux.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So
it
cool.
is.
All right, that was fun. Journalism to adventure gallivanting around the world, having people videograph you. How did you evolve from being sort of behind the camera or next to the camera writing these stories and doing this sort of like investigative journalism, and I think there was some political journalism at one point, and now it's this like Laura Croft experience. How did that evolve?
I think it's really a story of finding your truth and what makes you happy and really devoting yourself to that predominantly in a career space. And when I first started journalism and when I got my degree in journalism, I had 7 different majors in college and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it was the TV show Quantum Leap, which was, I don't know if you remember, but it was like probably before either one of our times, but we were seeing it in reruns. And it was this guy that would quantum leap through time. And then he would, he would embody a doctor, and then he would have like a mission in that lifetime. And then he could jump again, and he was trying to get home. Okay. And I remember being so fascinated by the story because I thought, well, that's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. I don't want to live one life. I don't want to have one career. I want to live all these different lives and have all these different careers, kind of like he did, jumping into these lifetimes. And journalism really seemed the way to get there. Like I could be anything adjacent and tell the story and then get to have that experience. And when you come to Los Angeles and you're a girl and you're doing journalism stuff, like there's a plethora of things that you can do. You can do straight journalism. I mean, we did gangs in Compton, we did, police corruption in Mexico City. Like there's so many things we did. And then I would cover festivals and food and all sorts of different things, red carpets. And then eventually I really started leaning more and more into what I had a passion for, which is travel, the outdoors, the ocean, and had, the distinct honor of getting to do those types of shows and still get to.
Was there one particular point in that journey when you were like, I'm doubling down, or did it just kind of gradually happen? How did that transition go? Because red carpet seems so far from Shark Week.
It is. And I think you kind of, as a girl in the city, in the beginning, you get pushed into that sort of stuff. You get, kind of like corralled into red carpet and fashion and beauty. And I dabbled in all of that and was like, no, it's not really for me. I did car shows, I did food shows. And I was like, well, this is actually a little bit more cool. This I'm really enjoying. And then when I really started to, I have a background in anthropology as well, and I think that was helpful with some of the first shows like Legend Quest that I started doing in that space, because people were like, oh, okay, she has an expertise in this area and in being outdoors my whole life. So the door started to crack a little bit more, and I had to push and push and push and push, and eventually it kind of became my niche, and I'm super grateful for that.
It's very cool. It's a great space to be in. You're in this cool, unique space, and you've really kind of gone from current TV through the red carpets, doing that work that wasn't necessarily fulfilling. For other younger people who are coming up, or even for specifically, let's talk about a young female, girls coming up in this society, especially coming through Hollywood. The cool thing, I guess, is today journalism isn't regulated to this city. But what advice would you give to somebody who really wants to follow their passions, in particular in the ocean?
Great question again. I would say, first of all, passion sells. When people do what they love doing, they're very often good at it. And it's a very inviting space to be in and to be around. I could listen, even if it's something that I know nothing about, I could listen to someone speak about their passions for hours, because there is an inner glow that comes out when someone talks about something that they love. And I see that with the people that I work with, yourself included, in the spaces that we've all kind of come to own. My shark scientists, like I love working 12-hour days with a shark scientist and then watching him at the end of the day wander over and and look in the ocean just to see if maybe there's one last shark there, because you know that this person is so passionate about that. So I think knowing what your passion is, identifying it, like what makes you happy. You know, it's like Marie Kondo your life, but from an emotional standpoint. Like really think about the things you do on the daily and how you invest your time, and sit with it and hold it for a second. And if it brings you joy, invest more time in that. If it doesn't, maybe it's time to refocus a little bit. And, you know, the other thing is, like, the world really is your oyster. Like, I think when you find your passion and you start to pursue that, it also creates longevity in the career that you're in. You know, people say there's so much burnout in the entertainment industry, and there is. But if you're doing what you love, you're going to be around a lot longer, and you're going to enjoy it a lot more.
Follow passions.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it does exude. I see it from you. And even in your early journalism stuff, you just had spark, and it was so contagious. It's really fun to watch.
Oh, that makes me happy. Thank you.
All right. Let's talk about Shark Week. I mean, this is a show that has transcended culture. Like, people that aren't ocean enthusiasts are diehard Shark Week fans. It's become this pop culture thing.
Yeah.
It is a unique opportunity to talk about the ocean, but it really didn't start that way. How do you think? How do you describe what is Shark Week and how it's become such a big thing? It's become a sensation.
Yeah, the Shark Week is a phenomenon, and it's one of those things where I bet you that the executives who started it, which it started in a very different way, but I'm sure people were looking around going, whoa, so are you guys seeing this?
Yeah.
And it took a while to get there, but Shark Week, I believe, is the longest running series in television. This year, 2023, is year 35.
Wow.
Yeah, so 35 years of Shark Week coming up, which is, you know, a series of different shows, anywhere from 18 to 40, all done by different production companies and all in the shark space. And Shark Week has gone through a lot of evolutions throughout, you know, even though sharks have essentially for 100 million years been the same, Shark Week has gone through a lot of evolutions in its 35 years. And it, you know, really did kind of start with more of kind of like a nature series. And then, you know, it had some years where it just literally jumped the shark, and we did some really crazy stuff. And then you have the celebrity stuff, and then you have the really scientific shows. And I would say that now Shark Week has really hit its stride with, they'll cater to all the audiences. So you have your Jackass audience that watches the Shark Week Jackass special, and then you've got the more scientific ones and new research, and papers come out of Shark Week. You know, it has become such a phenomenon, and I think it taps into this primal desire to know more about these animals that really are terrifying to a large number of people, simply because they exist in this world that is so foreign to us. Like, it's either the ocean or it's outer space. You know, there are creatures in outer space, we would probably feel similarly about them. And here they are in this, you know, liquid planet.
Yeah.
And that to most people, like, if they dip their toe in, that's as far as they go.
Yeah, I absolutely resonate with that. I think that there's something that kind of comes up from our DNA, knowing that we came from the ocean and that these organisms are above us in the pecking order of the food chain, that we are not the top. And Shark Week kind of reminds us on this subtle layer that we are but mere cogs in a very complex web.
That's such a great way of putting it. You know, I had a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday who's in Colorado, and she heard wolves howl for the first time. And she said, Kinga, I can't explain it to you. It's a visceral reaction in your entire body. She said, I had goosebumps all over my whole body. And I've been on the savannah in Africa, in Zimbabwe, listening to lions roar. And it's the same sort of like primal reaction that your system has. And I think people have that same sort of thing for sharks. Yes. Even though there's not necessarily a sound that they make, the visual. Although I was just going to say, we've created a sound, haven't we? Because the media has, that's their sound. So now when people hear that, they go, ooh, because we've associated that. Yeah. So I get why people are afraid of sharks and thereby fascinated by them.
Yeah. It instills a sense of fear, but I think underneath that, it's respect, humility, and reminder that we are fragile beings alive having a very finite experience, and these things are part of that life cycle.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And I like that.
Absolutely.
I like knowing that on the savannah there are lions and leopards and hippos and crocodiles and elephants. Like, I like knowing when I'm backpacking that there are bears out there. Yeah. Like, I don't want to be the dominant apex predator in every scenario. I love knowing that there are sharks and orcas in the ocean.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to be able to sleep in a safe home, but we feel most alive when we are part of that cycle.
Yeah, when we're close to it. And that's, maybe that's part of why Shark Week is such a phenomenon, because I think in the modern world, people have lost a lot of that connection to nature. People don't harvest their own food anymore. Yeah. People don't get out. I think
nature deficit.
Yeah, there is nature deficit. We live in like concrete jungles. People go from their home to their car to their office and back to the grocery store. Sometimes they don't even touch soil. And I think when you see something as primal as sharks in the ocean, which is this foreign space, it's very riveting to people who have distanced themselves from that.
Yeah, and we need riveting sometimes.
Yes.
We need to stay awake, to use all of our senses.
Yeah, and it probably like highlights those primal senses too.
Yeah, because we all came from the ocean. It's in our genetics.
Yeah.
In all the different variations of Shark Week, and a lot of the media has portrayed this this Jaws, this fear. Speak to me a little bit about the potential negative effects of just focusing on the fear aspect, right? How has that negatively impacted not only education, but our policy and I think policy and actions. What are the actions and the outcomes of just focusing on the fear of sharks?
So sharks have a really crappy PR agent, or they did for a very long time. And I will never say that I don't understand why people are afraid of sharks. They are big fish with really sharp teeth that live in an environment that is foreign to us. I totally get it. But what we've done as a society is we have vilified them to the point of we've created almost something supernatural. And obviously to a lot of people, the inception of that fear was Jaws. It was to me. And
I've never seen it, by the way.
We've talked about this, and that is just wild to me.
I don't want it. There's
so
no
wild.
reason to watch it.
It's,
it just perpetuates untruths, I think.
It's true. But what made that movie work the way it did is because the creepy mechanical shark, which, today we would look at that and laugh because it's so badly done, but of the time it was great, but it didn't work. Yeah. And so he really tapped into that fear of the unknown. The fact that you really don't see the shark that much, that's what really people are afraid of. And I think when you get out into the ocean and you don't know what's down there, and that could be 30 feet, that could be 2,000 feet below you, that taps into that so much. Yeah. But with that fear, it's interesting because people love bears. There's teddy bears, and they love lions, and they're so cute. And I've had stuffed lions and stuffed bears, but you and I have both swam next to sharks. I have never walked next to a wild grizzly bear or a wild lion because I would most likely be dead.
Yeah.
So I had a scientist that I worked with once that said sharks are the most patient predators. And I thought, gosh, that's so true, because they will allow us more into their space than tigers, lions, bears, maybe even a dog that you don't know. And the media has instead created this insane amount of fear around them. And would it be terrifying to have like an unfortunate encounter with a shark? Yes, it would be. But I read on Facebook this woman arguing the other day and saying, oh, tiger sharks should be killed. They kill the second most, humongous number of humans after white sharks. And I thought about that, and I went and I Googled, and I thought, wow, she is correct. But I should write her back and say, hey, since record keeping began ever, in the history of ever, tiger sharks have killed 36 people, ma'am. Like 36 people in the history of ever. I read that children under the age of 14, like children, kill more adults in the United States every year than that tiger sharks have in the history of the world. So,
and that makes sense,
right?
because sharks, kids want to put everything in their mouth,
exactly.
touch it and taste it.
exactly. Yes.
What a crazy misinterpretation of facts.
Yes, we're just riding this fear, riding this fear of this big toothy fish, which I understand. But again, focusing on tiger sharks, 36 people in the history of the world, more people have choked on hot dogs. More people have been killed by couches. More people have been killed by tables. More people have been killed by their phones.
Yeah. It's probably more than 36 because we weren't record keeping, but in the history of record keeping.
Yeah, in the history of record keeping, yes.
Yeah. That is some bad PR.
That's some bad PR.
And how do you see that, like, practically today? Because I know there's been, like, shark culling and all these things, and now some people are saying, oh, now there's too many sharks. Like, macro perspective, like, this is not necessarily a healthy populace understanding of sharks. I know you've done a lot of work with shark allies. Like, what are some of the current trends of sharks?
So, you talk about things like shark culling. And again, the reason I bring up numbers like 36, is the death of one person awful? Yes, absolutely, of course. But when you create like a monstrous problem out of something that's not really a problem, you create other problems, like the culling of sharks, which has actually been proven to be ineffective, but also it isn't that massive of an issue. And at the same time, it's interesting because fishermen are constantly saying, I have conversations with them like, oh, shark populations have blown up, they're out of balance. And I think nature doesn't make mistakes like that. They're not out of balance. The problem is that before we as humans were here, nature had everything. It had it. Like, I got it, you guys, I'm good. Nature knows what she's doing. There was the right amount of sharks. There was the right amount of prey fish. Like, everything was in balance. And then we came along and we started annihilating that. And now, because of the protections that we've enacted, shark populations are coming back. But when you hear fishermen say something like, they're taking all of our fish, I go, okay, but that's because in the United States alone, last year we issued 39 million fishing permits. That's more than we ever have historically. At the same time, we are depleting fish stock all across our oceans, and we're destroying habitats. So the sharks that are left are all coming to the same areas that the fishermen are, and the number of fishermen is actually increasing. So you're not looking at like logical thinking when people go, numbers of sharks are increasing and they're taking all of our fish. You have a lot of other factors there, and it's not like suddenly there are more sharks in the oceans than there have been before. There are not. They are still being depleted.
There are so few abundant ecosystems today that are being well managed because we've depleted them, and as you said, whether that's overfishing or pollution.
Habitat loss, all of that, all of the above.
Did you see that recent video that I think Rogan shared of like this mass aggregation of sharks? Did you see that?
I don't know. Was it the one in Florida? Was it the blacktips and the spinners?
Maybe. It looked like somewhere in the Gulf, some guys were fishing and there was just like a frenzy.
Oh, I did see that. Yes.
Yeah.
I did see that.
How would a scientist describe that sort of event in the terms of unique or normal occurrence, or like, wow, that's great to see that? What are your thoughts on
it? It is great to see that. From what I remember that video, that was probably a bait ball of fish. Mm-hmm. And then you have sharks, you have dolphins, you have pinnipeds in there, you have birds bombing in. it's the famous sardine run in South Africa.
Right.
And in other places in the world, you have that too. So that is a natural, exactly. So you have that as a natural occurrence. And I think that's kind of this this almost focused look at a very healthy ecosystem, because when you do have those types of bait balls, and I've seen them right out here in the Pacific Ocean off of Southern California as well, and you have all those different animals, the marine mammals, the sharks, the birds, you know that this is a healthy place.
Yeah.
So seeing that video and seeing that in the Gulf made me really happy.
Yeah. It underscores, again, the misrepresentation when somebody sees that and then elevates it like Rogan in a way that's like, look at this scary, horrible thing when somebody else might look at it and say, wow, the ecosystem in that instance is working. We have an abundance of organisms living, dying, feeding, all right there. And that's
what's
just how we frame it.
Absolutely, it's exactly how you frame it. What's scary about that perspective? If you went into a chicken yard and you threw seed and all the chickens came and started pecking at it, it's the exact same thing. It's how they eat.
Yeah.
Remember, Jacques Cousteau said in one of his marvelous books, someone said something about sharks attacking their prey, and he said, attacking? He's like, I'm attacking these eggs right now. You're eating. This is how they eat. They have teeth. They don't use a fork and a knife and a spoon. They have their teeth. This is how they feed. Yeah. So, for us to constantly be saying a shark is attacking its prey. Well, I attacked coffee this morning. It really is how you frame it. Yes. And we could put down kibble for puppies and have 20 puppies come in and they're going to go for that food just as aggressively, but they're puppies. Yeah. So they're super cute. Yeah. But here you have a white shark. And so that's less cute in the scale of human cuteness balance.
Yeah. We definitely need more teddy bears and teddy sharks.
Yes.
You've been involved with Shark Allies. I think you might be a board member of Shark Allies. Mm-hmm. What actions do you encourage people, community, policy? What are the core things that Shark Allies is advocating for?
So at Shark Allies, we have some amazing women who do some really incredible work. As a matter of fact, Stephanie Brundle was just in the EU. We're helping with that fin ban. She's now in Mexico. I know Laurel and Erica are down south doing some massive work as well. Really, what Shark Allies looks at from a healthy ocean perspective, and sharks being a keystone species, is how do we change public perception of these sharks? How do we help enact laws that protect these sharks? How do we keep those laws in check? What else can we do? What kind of information? Who else can we work with? Scientists? What else can we learn to help instill protections? And, the big things, obviously, for sharks, as is for a lot of animals on this planet, you have habitat loss. In sharks' cases, we're looking at commercial fishing, which is the case with so many fish species. They are caught as a byproduct for that when they are kept for their fins, for their squalene, their liver oil, their meat, which is not really something we would ever advocate people eat. It is very high in mercury and other pollutants. So you have sharks being taken for a number of reasons at alarming rates. I mean, the numbers for a long time have been 75 to 100 million sharks every year taken just for the fin trade. Then you have all the bycatch, then you have the habitat loss, then you have their food source being annihilated and taken by commercial fishing as well. So you have all of these issues. So Shark Allies has been very involved in helping to create fin bans. So here in the United States, in Florida, Stephanie was working on that, and Laurel and Erica as well. And that got pushed through 2 years ago. So you can no longer sell or trade shark fins because we have to stop that flow through our borders as well. We advocate for habitat protection and for bycatch regulations.
That was so eye-opening to me, seeing that campaign that you guys were doing in Florida, that Florida had become a loophole in the system, that so much of it was transiting through there. So thank you for the work that you guys are doing.
Well, that was all the ladies. I applaud them. I mean, Stephanie pounds the pavement when it comes to that type of work and the legislation. And it's not, Instagram pretty. It's not as pretty as influencing, but that's where a lot of the real work is done.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it takes all. Okay, we're doing this sort of Seatopia blog podcast thing. Seatopia is seafood, and you've been supporting and advocating, condoning the work that we do with Seatopia. Could you elaborate a little bit on your thoughts on seafood and the work that Seatopia is doing and how that is complementary to what you're doing?
Well, I personally love seafood. And as someone who loves the ocean, I feel like then it becomes my responsibility that if I'm going to enjoy that seafood, I want to make sure that I sustain it, that I source it as sustainably as possible. So, Mark and I spearfish. He catches a lot of our fish, so we eat that fish here. And then really the only other fish that we eat is Seatopia. One, because it's delicious. And two, because I have this perfect channel of communication that I get to learn about where you source all of your fish and all these wonderful products from. And I have been in awe actually getting to visit La Paz and getting to visit some of these farms and see what you guys are doing and following your journey and watching everything and observing. I am so impressed because the reality is that seafood is a terrific source of protein for us humans on this planet. But we have to think of a better way to be doing it than the way we have been doing it in the past. When I was born, there were 4 billion people on this planet. Now there are 8 billion people on this planet. And I'm not 500 years old. So we are exponentially increasing the number of persons that we have on this planet. And those people do have to eat and they do need a sustainable source of protein. And fish is a wonderful source of protein. But if we don't do it well, like how Seatopia is doing, and instead we continue to over-harvest our oceans with commercial fishing practices that have been going on now in a way that is depleting everything, we're not going to have anything to take anymore. So for me to be able to support a company that I love eating, that my mouth waters even thinking about the delicacies that we've had, but then also know that we are creating something moving forward for the human species to continue to get to enjoy this resource in a way that's sustainable is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. So well put. I too love seafood. I love how my body feels when I eat clean seafood, and knowing that we can actually do it in a way that is beneficial and sustainable, and even helping create healthy ecosystems, rehabilitating, regenerating the oceans is something that just is so inspiring to me on a daily basis. So it's fun that you've been to La Paz, that you've been doing this research, you've been visiting these regions and learning about this. So thank you for sharing your experience and your passion.
Well, thank you for sharing your seafood.
We talk a little about sustainability, right, and how that relates to Seatopia. In what other areas does that sort of commitment to sustainability carry over into your life? How do you think about sustainability in every aspect of your actions and living?
That's, again, a great question because we have 8 billion people on this planet. And I think we all need to be responsible for ourselves and this planet and really source things. And one of the things that we do every day is we vote with our dollars about how we want things to be presented to us, how we want the government to look at things, and what laws do we want them to pass, what do we want them to support or not support. And I think that's such an important thing when you go out there and when we talk about food, we talk about seafood, or we talk about meat, or we talk about anything, to know where that food comes from, to know how it's raised, to know the impact that it's having. I love when people reconnect with nature, and I've watched friends do that. And there's something special about that, not just in helping you and making you desirable of a sustainable lifestyle, but also I just think that is where we belong and where we thrive and where we relax and where we find our peace. But obviously that connection also reminds us that we're a part of like this cycle and we need to be responsible for ourselves. I think a really beautiful way of looking at things, because it can become so overwhelming sometimes, is my good friend, freediver Megan Haney-Greer, has a blog and a platform called The Imperfect Conservationist. And her message is, look, you don't have to like beat yourself every time oh, I had to have a plastic water bottle because I was somewhere and I needed this, or, whatever it is. But she has these great little tips and tricks for doing the best you can, but not beating yourself up or other people, because we know that people tend to be, get pretty aggressive at others. Yeah. And I think supporting people in the smallest things that they do, whether it's something that they change in their everyday habits or whether it's something that they're advocating for, I think offering people that kind of support and giving yourself some grace is really important.
Yeah, thank you. It's not about perfection, it's about action.
Yeah, It is. Even the tiniest thing helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Seafood just happens to be one of those things. Food just happens to be one of those things that is an incredible amount of energy that we expend every single day, or expend or take. You know, we are literally voting with our forks 3 times a day, every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're voting for what we want to see more of. We're voting for our own health and well-being. I mean, it's a pretty important vote that you're casting every time you take a bite of food.
Absolutely. How do we power the world? How do we power our lives?
Yeah.
To some of the work that you did with Current TV and some of the other journalisms, where like you were in Compton looking at gang warfare, and you've been in the savannas. You're in these contrasting places of human interaction and nature. How does that? How do those experiences inform your perspective of the world, and what sort of learnings would you say, like, because we talked a little bit about like renaturing, like how important is that, and what are some of the things that you've learned through those experiences?
It's such an incredible balance to have traveled to all these different places and witness all these different types of lifestyles. I mean, there are people that I've talked to that live 10 miles away from the beach who have never seen the ocean. And, you know, there are people who have never left the city, have never spent one night under the stars. And then I've met trackers in Africa that can look at a patch of dirt and tell you how many lions just came through, whether they were walking or running, and how fast they were going. And I'm looking at this going, I see dirt. So you clearly have these different levels of people's connection to Earth, to the planet, to what's around us. And I think what's really awesome, and I hope I'm not just making this up in my own head because it's the bubble that I'm in, but I feel like there are a lot of people who are wanting to reconnect with nature more. I feel like survival classes have become more popular. I feel like, you know, people are getting out into the ocean a lot more. People are embracing things in a way, and maybe part of it is the good side of social media, that it introduces people to things that they can then go pursue that maybe they wouldn't have thought about before, which is also a double-edged sword because everything's getting crowded. But I like seeing that there are people that are trying harder and harder to find that reconnection with nature, maybe with their food, people who are choosing to grow their own food, people who are really becoming invested. Like I have friends in Florida that just bought an entire pig from a farm, and then they, you know, butcher it themselves and do whatever they want to, because that they wanted to feel that connection that our ancestors had that so many people don't have.
In many ways, I feel like that should be a rite of passage or a responsibility to any carnivore. If you're going to be consuming, you should have a respect and connection to where that came from.
100%. I always say that. Yeah.
Itadakimasu as a Japanese kind of maxim, and respecting the entire supply chain and knowing where it came from. Yeah.
It's beautiful, having that connection.
Yeah. Kinga, as a woman, really making a name for yourself in journalism and adventure journalism, what are some of the challenges that you face, and some of the unique experiences that you've come through to create this position where you are today as not just an influencer, but as a woman who's been a host of Shark Week, such a unique position. Like, what are some of the challenges that you've overcome in your journey?
I think I'm very fortunate that, especially my parents and like my core team of support around me my whole life, like great friends and lovely humans, no one ever made me feel like there was something that was out of reach for me or that I shouldn't pursue because it just wasn't done. Even though when I first came in like 23 years ago to this industry, there really weren't a lot of women in the adventure travel space and the shark space. There definitely were women doing those sorts of things, but they weren't really given those types of opportunities on camera. And I never really understood why that wouldn't be the case. So I kind of kept pushing that little door until it opened. And I have to say that my life has been incredible because of that. And that, again, goes back to following your passions. And I can work an 18-hour day and my heels be bleeding because I've had my fins on. You know, we've been looking for sharks all day. And I don't feel like I worked. That's an amazing thing to be able to say. I spent my day in the ocean today looking for tiger sharks and I called it work. Or, I have to fly to Zimbabwe for work today. My life is magical, and I am forever grateful that I've had these experiences and access to things in such a wonderful way because of the TV space.
What does that gentle push look like, feel like? I've met your mom, and she is a gentle but very quick-witted human, and she has this I can see how she would have informed some of that personality. But can you tell me a little bit about pushing that? Is that pitching your story year after year? What does that look like?
Oh yeah, all of the above. We're Polish, so I think we're used to being trampled a little bit, being shoved out of the way, but we just bounce right back. We're like Rubbermaid. We're still here. So it was a lot of that. You face a lot of rejection in this industry, and especially I think as a woman trying to get into that space, there was a lot of oh, that's cute, trying to be Laura Croft. Oh, look at that. And with Shark Week, I think those guys are so awesome, and the gals over there, but I think they were finally somebody just give her a show so she leaves us alone. Because every year I was hey guys, remember me? I work with sharks and I also host shows. I've got some ideas this year. Yeah. Here's about 37 ideas I have for you. And they were wow, okay. Somebody just give her a show, just give her a show. So I was very grateful when I got to do Shark Week, and the fact that I got to be the first girl who hosted her own Shark Week show was pretty darn awesome.
It's very awesome. And it's not, just to make sure people understand, this is not something that just was presented to you. You really asked for it over and over and over and manifested that and pushed and brought that to fruition.
Yes, when I say that I gently pushed that door, it was more like the battering ram that the SWAT team enters with. It was kind of like that.
Amazing. I'm so proud of you. That's such an amazing accomplishment, and not just for sharks, but for women and for journalism and for nature to share your perspective on this. So yeah.
Thank you.
So, Seatopia as a mission is about scaling regenerative practices in seafood and changing our relationship with seafood. Can you, just for fun, bring us back to how you first became acquainted with Seatopia?
Well, I had the pleasure of becoming acquainted with Seatopia through you. And I feel like we must have started doing this at Thanksgiving one year, or one of the holidays, because all I know is that whenever you and Daniela were there would be a seafood spread like I had never seen before, and there would be a stampede of all guests to try to get a piece of this. And I remember us having conversations about it because we've always been so aligned in how our ocean ethos and sustainability. And I think the words you used in opening this question, the scalable restorative practices and regenerative of what Seatopia is, and learning about that was what fascinated me so much, is that you have this delicious, healthy product that people enjoy, that our bodies crave, is good for us. And it's done in a way that is actually beneficial for the planet. And, much kind of like with sharks were sort of the underdogs. And I felt like I want to get behind the underdogs. I think now people are starting to understand aquaculture a lot more. But for a while, people didn't really understand what it was. And it kind of got pushed to the side. And it wasn't understood that was actually a positive thing to be doing for the environment, that it was a much more sustainable option than sending out these giant ships that basically just harvest everything and, get rid of everything that isn't wanted, but could have gone on living, destroyed. Yeah. So getting to know something that is so fantastic. I mean, top quality, top line, phenomenal seafood, and also align with my practices and integrity in the space of sustainability and conservation. That's such a win-win for me.
I love the analogy of kind of the underdogs, because in some ways how sharks are misunderstood. Exactly. Aquaculture is often misunderstood, sort of first impressions of sharks. align sometimes with first impressions of aquaculture.
Yeah.
You know, it's not all, you can't lump all sharks as bad. You can't lump all aquaculture as bad.
Exactly.
You can't lump all aquaculture as good either. You know, there, you have to get into the nuance and really develop that relationship. A couple of really great kind of analogies came out of this conversation. I really appreciated the analogy of how sharks are patient hunters, and that's so. I really resonate with that. Like, I've been so close to sharks that were demonstrating aggressive behavior, but I've never had a grizzly bear, and I've been to Alaska. Like, I've been like very close to grizzly bears. I've seen like wet paw prints in the dirt, but I didn't see where he was. You know, it was like dry dirt and then wet paw print, but he was avoiding me, right? He wasn't coming into my space like a shark does. You know, they are patient, and
I've been me to you to a tiger shark.
Yeah.
And I've never been this close to a lion, a male lion, or a grizzly bear, because I just don't think you could do that to a wild animal. No. And with sharks, I mean, do I recommend that everyone run out and do that? No, like, we all have a lot of experience in the water with them. But the fact that that is something that you can do is pretty incredible. Yeah.
It really is such a different perspective than this like, oh, they close their eyes and just bite at everything. They're literally coming in and inquisitively inspecting things. Otherwise, those experiences that you and I have both shared with sharks wouldn't exist. You know,
exactly.
There's a real lesson in that analogy. It's super powerful. And in the same vein, aquaculture needs to be understood. It is a misunderstood, and we need to develop deeper relationships because it is part of the solution. It is far more sustainable when done right than industrial scale practices that are resulting in numerous bycatch.
So well said.
I'm going to ask if there's any sort of closing anecdotes from your experiences, from your adventures, that relate to sort of your commitments to conservation and sustainability. Like, what are there any sort of learnings from that journey that illustrate those sort of commitments?
Yes. I would say life is balance. And I have had the pleasure of being in some of the most beautiful and pristine and healthy environments in the world, where, you know, you see biomass and coral reefs and you know, beautiful, beautiful life as it should be. And then I've also been in places that are remote and untouched, and you are wading up to your knees through plastic because that's where the currents have dumped off all of our trash. And I think, you know, it is easy. You have to have a comprehensive look at the world, because if you focus too much on one thing, the good or the bad, you're not going to get a comprehensive picture. And it's so easy to get down on life and think, how are we ever going to dig ourselves out of this? When you focus on the damage that is being done to our oceans, to our planet, to the piles of plastic, to the, you know, sharks being finned. And you also can't just focus on these beautiful little pockets, like in French Polynesia, of healthy coral reefs, but they are our hope. And I don't think it's too late. I think we can still lean more towards these beautiful pockets and help those to expand, while also contributing to removing some of the practices from this planet that are doing a lot of damage, like single-use plastic, and the fact that that's infiltrated every corner of this earth. So finding that balance and knowing that it's not too late, and knowing that there's still so much magic on this planet, but there's also a warning, is immensely important.
Yeah. Yeah, that balance is so interesting. I think sometimes when people think of abundance in nature, they think that there is no death. And also, it's like sharks are part of that complement, right? They
Yeah.
are some of these most beautiful places that I've seen. There's also a lot of death because
Of course.
there
Cycle
are
of life.
animals being born and there's animals dying. And yeah, and unfortunately, on the same side of that balance, it's all connected, and these gyres of Pacific currents are bringing the abundance of plastic
Yeah.
that is being created into the ecosystems. Yeah, it is not something that I think existed when you and I were kids, was these plastic rivers. You know, it is a unique experience that has a unique time in our existence when we are just dumping these massive quantities of plastic.
Yeah.
And we have to come up with a better solution. We need to develop, I think, a responsibility. Every company who uses plastic needs to have an onus of responsibility for the environment and the impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because all the plastic that was floating around when you and I were kids is still out there floating around, and now there's that much more. It's not stopping. It's not going away.
Yeah, well, some of it's all the way down the Marianas, some
Yep.
of it's top of the Himalayas, and a lot of it's in humans because
Yeah,
it's now
so it's in
become
our blood.
part of the food system. 25% of wild caught fish now have plastics in them.
It's bonkers.
Yeah. Okay, for those moved by our conversation, what would you recommend that they do? What are a few tangible actions that people can take to get more involved in conservation, in sustainability, in supporting sharks? What do you recommend Seatopia customers and the ocean conscious community at large, or even just foodies? Just give me a few actions if you could just ask people to take a couple actions this week.
Great. Well, I think if they're Seatopia customers, they are probably already conscious of where their food is being sourced, and especially their seafood. And that's such an important one. You know, again, we talked about voting with our dollars, and that's knowing where your food comes from, and especially your seafood, because there are so many issues with how it's harvested commercially. That is a huge one. You know, looking out for fish on the seafood watch and what you should be eating at certain times of year and from what areas, that's important knowledge. And there are a lot of websites out there, including Seatopia. I know you guys give some of that information too. I think, you know, another simple thing with sharks is shark products, shark cartilage, shark squalene. That is in a lot of cosmetics. It's in a lot of beauty products. And again, vote with your dollars. You know, don't pay for that.
Yeah.
There's plant squalene that can be used, and it's just as effective as a lubricant and as a moisturizer. Make sure that the companies that you're supporting are using plant squalene instead of shark squalene.
Yeah.
You know, supplements with shark cartilage and things like that doesn't really do anything. Sharks do get cancer. You know, that's a waste of money. It's also a waste of sharks. So there are really simple things like that you can do. And of course, you know, recycling and doing kind of the simple things, turning off the water when you're brushing your teeth, turning off the lights. I mean, conserving all of our resources on this planet. It's all a cycle. So what if you're conserving electricity, you're also conserving the oceans.
Yeah, it's all connected. It is a grand ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Squalene, shark squalene in beauty products.
Yeah, it's all over.
So weird.
See, that's what this, people don't realize that. Like, it's, even if people just looked at chapsticks and stuff, like I will often look, there are products that I stopped using because they were using squalene. There's even, there's like a really popular hair supplement called Viviscal, and that uses shark squalene. I used to use it until I found out, and I was like, no, I don't know.
When you are looking at beauty products, it'll be listed as squalene. Are there any other words or terms that they hide it under?
I believe that there are other words, and I would have to find a list of those, but I'm certain there are because they do that with everything.
Yeah.
But squalene is the big one, and oftentimes the problem is it won't tell you where it's sourced, because you can get squalene from olives plants. but a really popular one is shark liver oil. And that was actually also used as an adjuvant in vaccines, is shark squalene.
Right. Yeah, I remember reading about that. We'll have to put some more links in the show notes on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we'll do
Really
that.
interesting.
We'll look it up.
Yeah, maybe we'll call out some brands.
I think we tried to, the companies that Jessica Alba that runs the Honest Company, they wouldn't get back to us and tell us where their squalene's from. Because we did a whole thing about like reaching out to companies and asking.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
All right. People who want to follow your journey, that somebody who hasn't already connected with you, can you tell our audience a little bit more, our community, how to keep in touch with you if somebody wants to follow your journey or reach out to you? Where can they find you?
Well, I think that, social media these days is kind of the best way to go, isn't it? So I have my Instagram, and it's all under my name, Kinga Philips. But more importantly, there's Shark Allies that people can follow and learn a lot more about sharks and the programs that we're working on right now and how they can help and support. And of course, the Seatopia website, which is where they are watching this. But yeah, social media.
Okay. Mahalo so much for your time and all of your work. Your passion is just contagious. Awesome.
Thank you. Ditto.
Right on. That was so fun.
That was great. I love it.
Okay, let's do one more anecdote. One last thing. I want to talk just for a minute about wild harvesting seafood. And I have so much respect for your partner, Mark, and his demonstrated control or reservations or I don't know a different way to say this, but he has not pulled the trigger when it's as he might say, something like not necessary. Can you speak a little bit about you and your experience with spearfishing? Because a lot of people ask us like our thoughts on seafood and wild caught seafood. My vision, our vision as a company, is that there's a place for wild caught seafood, and it probably should be regulated just to recreational fishing because there's already so much pressure. And of the different types of recreational fishing, you can accidentally catch a rockfish that is undersized and its bladder is going to fill up when it comes up to the different pressures, and you're not going to be able to get it back down there and without completely damaging it. Talk to me a little about spearfishing and what I think is sort of an evolving understanding of selective harvesting, because you and Mark were in Costa Rica just recently. You guys went and the video I saw of you that you took of Mark hanging out with a sailfish and a tuna was so beautifully illustrated this point that there's an evolution that transitioned from like this idea of trophy hunting to actual cultivating seafood. It's such a humble and honest way to look at it, and I just would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, this is such a great topic, and I think we're both very passionate about this. And I am a huge advocate in, like we have talked about so many times, that people have a connection to the natural world and especially their food. And in our world, that is quite frankly becoming increasingly difficult. Most kids, if you ask them where, chicken comes from, it's Ralph's, right? But they don't have any extension of where was that chicken before it made it onto its plate. Or they think that the chicken, the animal, versus the chicken that they buy in Ralph's are two completely different things. One of, I think, the magnificent things about going back to the idea of harvesting our food, it's kind of like living on a farm in the days of yore. People harvested all of their own vegetables, their own fruit. You ate them in season because that's when they were available. You harvested your own animals. were you going to go out in your backyard and kill 4 goats and just leave 3 of them and eat 1? No, you would never do that. That would be stupid, because you would be wasting your food source, and you would also be wasting your own energy. And I think that kind of mentality going into harvesting your food is really the only mentality that you should have. Is everyone going to see things that way? No. Do we have trophy hunters in the terrestrial world? Yes, absolutely. They just want the lion head hanging on their wall. I don't have respect for that. I have immense respect for people who hunt for their food. And I think with spearfishing, that is the most magnificent way to have the ultimate connection with your food source, because we drop down on these reefs, and like you said, Mark, his ethos with all this is very inspiring to me, because he will drop down, he will look around. If you're reef hunting fish, say here in Southern California, and you see sheep's head, and you see the females started to transition into males, you know that the males have been killed off and that these females are replacing them. So you consciously are part of that ecosystem for those moments that you're down there. And you think to yourself, I don't want to harvest this reef, it's been over harvested. You can't do that sitting on a boat with a rod and reel. And I have no problem with rod and reel fishing, but are you still going to get more bycatch? Absolutely. If you go down and you want to harvest a tuna, or you want to harvest a yellowtail, or you want to harvest a mahi-mahi, you are going to select the exact fish you want to take. There is no bycatch in spearfishing. So to me, having that ultimate selection and knowing your environment, because you're a part of it as you're hunting, is truly the only way to be doing that. And as opposed to the direct opposite, which is commercial fishing, where they drop down these nets and scoop up everything that's there. Turtles, dolphins, whales, sharks, you name it, when they're going after tuna.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have so much respect for you and Mark and the relationship that you guys have cultivated, and the way when I see you guys go out together and you're dropping down to depth, shooting fish with a camera. And that's something that, like, I think you and I both relate. Like, I've spent more time going down with my camera these days. I have a spear gun, and I end up going down with the camera more these days. But you're still at those depths, and Mark is down there. And one of the things that I most respect is when he doesn't pull the trigger, because there are opportunities for him to pull the trigger on a massive fish that's simply full of mercury, not that delicious, extra large fish that is breeding, not more than you actually need, more than you have ice for or you have a freezer for. You know, he's invested in having his own blast freezer and properly storing fish. And that's such a beautiful and respectful appreciation to be there and not pull the trigger unnecessarily.
I think that's exactly what it is. It's respect. And, you know, take the audience through basically the experience of spearfishing with someone like Mark, who's a very experienced and respectful spearfisherman. We go out to an area, you know, we drop down, we become part of the environment. We see whether this is a place that we want to hunt. And then when he does take a fish, he selects that exact fish. And we only take what we're going to eat. So, you know, there's no point in hunting 3 fish if we're on vacation somewhere. We'll bring in our catch. We'll, you know, he'll take care of the fish and deconstruct it, and then we'll bring it into a restaurant. But right when he shoots the fish, he kills that fish instantly. You don't want an animal to suffer ever. You know, he bleeds the fish, takes care of it, puts it on ice, and then watching Mark fillet a fish is beautiful, just like watching you do the same thing. You taught him so much of what he does. And what I think you both do is you meticulously utilize every single piece of that fish out of immense respect. And then I know what Mark does is he'll take the skeleton of the fish and he returns it to the ocean because he knows it'll be broken down by the system. Yeah. And that's the full circle of respect. And then how you treat that food is so important as well. The blast freezer is so important for, you know, the types of fish that we freeze and how we do it. And I know this is what Seatopia does with their fish as well, because it creates such a better product. The texture is so fantastic later, and that's respecting that animal.
Yeah, absolutely. Respect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kinga.
Thank you. As always, I love our chats. I love it. You're one of those people that's so good at speaking on camera, just like you would, like we would just be sitting and hanging out and having a conversation. It's a good thing.
Well, I jumped in the ocean to help just relax.
Oh, the ocean. The ocean.
All right.